we as humans are always searching for a story, and that's how we assign meaning to things. And so when we're presented with a story, it sticks in our mind so much more, and it's so much more compelling than just reading these ideas and deciding if we like them or not. And for me, I'm really interested in a lot of questions about morality and society and religion and freedom, and how all those ideas sort of intersect, which honestly, to bring it back to the paper in some ways, is sort of transcendentalism. There's a lot of moral code that goes into it, and talking about how to live a good life. And those questions span across, individuals to communities to all the way up to the level of the political and how that actually works, which is really interesting. There's a little bit of backstory to that piece, and it starts way back in my childhood. I read Little Women, which is Louisa May Alcott's most famous book, all the time. I loved it for some reason, even though it's sort of outside of my normal realm of literature that I enjoy. I really identified with the characters that are four sisters, and just it shaped a lot of my childhood because it's a book that I read when I was young. And so when I was signing up for classes last fall, I saw that there was a class in the English department that was just about Louisa May Alcott, which I had no idea there was more than the Little Women series, but there's a lot more. And what happens is we also kind of looked at the context around what she wrote and why. And that has to do with Transcendentalism, which was sort of a movement at the end of the 1800s. It was a cultural, political, spiritual, kind of all the things movement that dealt a lot with, it was sort of a response to Romanticism in that it was people writing, like Henry David Thoreau, writing about how to connect with nature, or what is the meaning of life, or what does all this look like in a rapidly changing world, which is following things like the Civil War. So there's a lot that was really happening in many ways, shaking up the culture. And Louisa May Alcott's writing really speaks to that. Little Women, as well as all her other novels and memoirs and everything she wrote. And so I wanted to analyze her books sort of from that viewpoint of Transcendentalism, and specifically some of the more political aspects, since that was what I was interested in. And so I ended up writing the paper and then going ahead and submitting it to Live Ideas. Like I discussed in the paper, there's a lot of themes that were happening at the time that she wrote the book, that, and all of her work really, that are kind of coming back now. There's a lot of social justice, environmentalism, like all these things that are happening. And I think a lot of her story still rings true, and people still read it in 2019, even though it was written to little girls in the 1800s, which is pretty crazy if you think about it. I think that's something I really like about Alcott, is that sometimes you read her books and at first glance you might think it's just a domestic book, and that's all there is to it, just about a family, about some girls, and not much else besides that. But I think she really shows how even within a context like a family, loving those around you and being there for them and kind of just taking one step a day and doing something small can actually end up having a big impact. She sees that there is some duty, like kind of a big overarching concept of duty. And I think that the way she addresses that tension, or she might, this is my interpretation of it, I guess, is that the duty that she thinks is important isn't necessarily the same duty that society thinks is important. It could overlap. She really emphasizes things like family, despite the fact that she's very individualist at the same time. But it's not always completely in line with what the trends of the time were or what the culture of the time was. But she does think that there's this idea of duty outside of whatever the trend is or whatever the norms are, sort of. And so I think that, like I said, sometimes that can overlap, but sometimes there could be a duty to things like becoming the best person you can be, or standing up for the rights of those that don't have them or don't have a voice, or pursuing the avenues of justice. Like, there's a duty to that just as much as she might think there's a duty to, do your job that's right in front of you. You know, as a political science major, I love a lot of the political theory, so Plato and a lot of the other ancient philosophers, Aquinas, Machiavelli, kind of looking at all the ideas of government and what it should be and what it shouldn't be and where the lines are with that. For me, that's something that I've been really interested in for a long time, but especially recently, as I feel like there's a lot of shifting that's going on worldwide, but also in America in specific. The questions that are being asked as technology is growing, as we're facing more social questions, we're trying to figure out where we are politically, and a lot of kind of just change are the same questions that Plato was facing, that Louisa May Alcott was facing. Questions like, what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to have rights? What does it mean to respect other humans? And what is the meaning of life? And especially as we're looking at more technology, I think those are the same questions that'll circle back around that we've been facing for hundreds of years. If there's anything that I've learned from reading primary texts, it is that we, as humans, don't change in many ways. Like, the technology around us changes. Hopefully we progress in certain ways, but at the core, there are still fundamental desires and truths and needs that drive us.